Major Garrett joins us now from the White House. Major, why did the president feel the need to give that speech last night, 4 days after the attacks?
There was a meeting here at the White House Saturday with the president's national security team. He was updated on the criminal investigation and the FBI terrorist investigation into the massacre in San Bernardino. And the consensus after that meeting was that this administration was sort of losing control of the debate in the country about ISIS, and the country was uncertain what would come next. The president wanted to, in part, reassure the country, offer it some details about what is part of the evolving strategy to confront ISIS from a military standpoint, but also the back half of the speech was as important as anything the president talked about strategically in taking on ISIS. That's the debate in the country about who we are, what our values are, what is our relationship collectively to Muslim Americans, because the president believes that's not just a question of American tolerance, it's a question of dealing with counterintelligence and counterterrorism strategies the most effective way, keeping communications wide and frequent and sympathetic within the Muslim community in America, and that's why the president devoted a good portion of the back end of the speech to that aspect of this debate.
But as you know, Major, the president didn't really lay out any new policies in stressing this notion of tolerance. You have to ask the question, does he have the political capital? Does he have the credibility among those people he's trying to reach to really unite the country?
That was a question debated here at the White House, and the answer came back, it doesn't matter how much political clout the president does or doesn't have, he cannot afford to be silent. The president and those closest to him have been watching the debate on the Republican side on the presidential campaign trail, and they believe it is getting a harder, less inclusive edge to it. And they wanted to put the president's voice in the middle of that debate, and if nothing else, at least set a pause button on the direction of that debate. And the White House believes uniquely a president is capable of doing that. And the timing of the speech is also interesting. You know, as we cover and have covered the Obama White House, we have, those of us in the press corps, noted how much the president likes to rely on all forms of new media, social media, YouTube videos, all sorts of other alternative mechanisms to get his message out. This was as traditional a means of talking to the country as any American president has used. Sunday night, prime time, Oval Office, commanding the largest audience you possibly can to convey not new policy, but to convey a message about what the country should do when it deals with this question of internal security, both in action and in attitude, but also to say to the country, we have our arms around this problem. It will take a while to solve, but ISIS's days are numbered. I think many Americans would have preferred something approximating a date on a calendar to circle. The president didn't give him that, and that's one of the reasons the president's speech is falling flatter than the White House hoped it would.
And adding to that, Major, the president said he's not willing to wage a ground war, yet a CNN poll taken before last week's shooting showed that a majority of Americans, 53%, support deploying combat troops on the ground. Now, this is clearly not the same environment in that President Obama campaigned in when he was candidate Obama back in 2008 when he vowed to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So what do you make of the reading of the tea leaves here?
So the political movement in this country is becoming much, much more open to the idea of taking ISIS on face to face, that is to say, on the ground with ground forces in Iraq and Syria. The president doesn't want to do that, believes it would be strategically unwise for a couple of reasons. One, when he announced last week that a special operations task force was going to Iraq, the Iraqi leadership said, you know what, they're not welcome. We're going to fight this battle on our own. And so there is a political dynamic within Iraq, by far of the two countries, more sympathetic to the cause of the United States than certainly Syria is, dominated by the dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad. So there are practical and political reasons that argue against placing large numbers of American troops on the ground in Iraq and in Syria. The other thing the president said last night, and his advisors have been saying this all along, large numbers of American troops may achieve a short-term military objective, but they won't solve the long-term problem. And until the Iraqis train themselves better, or other Muslim nations in the neighborhood to start to deploy their own ground troops and consider this fight theirs first and foremost, and the West's writ large secondarily, this fight will never be won. And so one of the reasons the president doesn't want to put American forces on the ground in large numbers is because he believes that would slow down, if not completely halt, the process going on in countries surrounding Iraq and Syria, which are now possibly more inclined to get into this fight.
Major Garrett reporting from the White House. Major, thanks so much.
Sure.